And we're trying to raise the profile of people in Scarborough and businesses in Scarborough and things like that. So, as I say, still early days. So we're on Twitter at the Digital Coast, and we've got a website there, digitalcoast.co.uk. You can join up to mailing this and come along and get involved. So that's it. So today we've got Rob, who's in our top corner there from Raspberry Pi. The hashtag for the event is piscarborough. We'll try not to annoy the US Fishing Federal Agency this time, like we did last time, with our choice of hashtag. So, housekeeping, if there's a fire, probably the way you came in, isn't it? So down the stairs and straight out. So a quick word on, well, I'm from ServerTastic with Andy, and we put this on today. And thanks to the University of Hull for supplying the room that we're all in. They're quite instrumental in the group as well, lending the support and things. So, without further ado, we've got Rob from Raspberry Pi. He's going to talk a little bit about I assume where it's come from, where it's going, and what impact it's had on education. We're lucky to have him. He's in Lisbon at the moment, in a hotel room. And he's spoken at places like Google and Firefox and places like that, so we're lucky to have him. We've also got Seggy, who's brought in his Raspberry Pi, and he's going to do a short presentation and a little demo for us later, and then we'll go downstairs and have drinks and calvinos. So we'll get cracking, that's okay. So to communicate with Rob, we have to use the microphone. And just give me 2 ticks. There we go. Rob, can you hear us? Is that okay?
I can indeed. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, fine. Excellent. Right, so I don't know if you heard any of that, but I'll hand over to Rob, and then any questions, we'll do a QA format after. So thanks very much, and Rob Bishop.
Hi guys, so thanks for being out to see me. I'm afraid, quite ironically, I'm actually out in Portugal, so for some reason I'm sort of coming to you via Skype in Yorkshire, back from Lisbon, despite the fact that I was actually born in Yorkshire myself, so it all feels a bit bizarre, but I guess that's telepresence. First off, who in the audience actually has a Pi? Awesome. So I guess I probably won't need to tell you guys too much what it's about, but I'll just cover a little bit about the back history, about why we created the Pi, what we're trying to achieve, talk a little bit about hacking with the Pi, and then hopefully there'll be lots of time for some questions and answers, and we can sort of talk about your projects, you know, maybe kickstart some projects if it hasn't quite left the anti-static bag yet. So, my name's Rob Bishop. I'm from the Raspberry Pi Foundation. I was the first employee, first engineering employee at least, and we've now finally got an office. We started off for the first 6 months working from my bedroom, which is pretty exciting, but at least, you know, now we've got to the point where we legitimately have somewhere to work. So, Raspberry Pi Foundation started by Dr. Eben Upton. He used to be a director of undergraduate studies for St John's College in Cambridge. And while he was there, what he discovered was that he was getting fewer applicants each year to do computer science. But not only was he getting fewer applicants, but the skills these applicants had was dropping. I remember him saying, you know, at one point the applicants would come in knowing 2 or 3 assembly languages, having some understanding of, you know, the CPU, having some understanding of programming, and now you kind of have people turning up where all they've ever done is written some HTML. And this is really bad, right? Because the problem is, if you have fewer applicants coming into university, we've got fewer graduates coming out. That's bad for industry, it's bad for the economy, and it's really bad for us as geeks because we have less cool toys to play with. And so he went away to try and figure out why this was. And essentially the problem is it's the kind of computing devices that we grew up with. You know, when you think about it, we of our generation grew up with sort of a games console and a home PC, typically. Whereas Eben grew up with something like a Spectrum. Now, when you compare the experiences, you know, when Eben wanted to go and play a video game, he'd go to the newsagents, he'd buy a PC magazine, he'd flick through to find a game that he liked, he'd then go back, he'd type up the code, like compile the code, and then play the game. And you contrast that with today, where we have these, you know, black plastic boxes that are very powerful but entirely abstracted, and the entire intention is just for us to download content. And when you think an Xbox 360 has better graphics than has better floating point operations per second due to the graphics chips than the Cray supercomputers. You know, that's quite incredible, but the problem is that's all hidden away from us. You know, Microsoft don't want to sell you an Xbox based on the silicon, they want to sell you it based on the games that you can download for it. And it's a similar story with the Windows PC. While you can go and download something like Visual Basic or Sigwin and go and do some development, the problem is that's all abstracted away from you. You know, there's a cost or effort barrier to actually going and creating something. Alternatively, of course, you know, we now have access to high-speed internet, access to all the wealth of the web, you know, and suddenly you have a situation where you've got this instant gratification of going online and watching hours worth of YouTube videos or playing with Flash against this cost or effort barrier to actually going and creating something. And like we said, you know, this is a big problem. I had the opportunity to go out to Cupertino, to California, to go and meet the Apple guys, and I spoke to some of the guys who are in charge of the iPad. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to make computing invisible. They don't want you to even be aware of the computer you're using. You know, it's about you and about the digital content you're downloading. See, that's really great if what you want to do is give access to the digital content. You know, we know this works. We know we've seen toddlers who can use iPads without being told how to do it. The problem is that if we hide the computers, how are we ever going to inspire people to realise that they should go and play with them, or to realise they should learn how to use them? And so what we need to do is bring computers back to the forefront. You know, we want it to be about the journey, not just about the content at the end, about the destination. And Stephen realised he was never going to be able to produce a device that was going to replace your games console or replace your computer. But what he might be able to do was develop something that was cheap enough, that was small enough, that you could use in addition. You know, something that would exist purely to be a toy, that would exist for hacking, for playing with, you know, and it would be something the student would own. You know, I'm sure many of you grew up in the same kind of situation I did, where, you know, you took things apart and they got shouted at with your parents because, you know, you've got the motherboard on the floor and your dad wants to go and do his online banking. You know, it's very important that kids own their computers, that it was theirs to play with, that, you know, they could tinker with it, they could turn it into a robot, they could leave it in a field to do data logging. And actually, you know, they'd be free to experiment because they knew that at the end of the day, they could just wipe the SD card, re-image it, and get back going again. And so for a long time, he tried to find a platform that would be good enough to do this, and he struggled to find anything that was cheap enough or accessible enough. He then got a job at Broadcom, where he was chip lead, where we were working on what's called an applications processor, which is a processor which goes in a smartphone, which basically handles everything apart from the baseband stuff and the radio. So what then happened is he saw that we had this development kit for this applications processor, and he had in his mind this idea for a cheap, you know, Unix box that could be open, that kids could go and experiment with, that they could learn with. And he realised actually that they weren't that far dissimilar. Now, one of the great things about engineering is that being an intern in engineering means actually you get to go do the cool jobs rather than just making the coffee like you would do for something like law or marketing, maybe. And so I actually was an intern for Evan back in the start of this project, and I did a lot of the work to do the very early prototypes to turn that development kit into a very small unit. And you might have seen the USB memory stick which had a camera module on it. That was shown by Rory Keffin-Jones from the BBC. And that was a very early prototype. It was very different from the form factor we have now, but it was just a proof of concept to show that we could make this cheap Unix box, and it would be perfect for kids to go and hack. So yeah, so it went up on the BBC. You know, initially everyone thought we were going to sell 10,000 units, and then suddenly, after we announced that, we put up a sign-up page, and they got over 100,000 people registering their interest. You know, we had 10 times as many as the entire run we thought we'd do as pre-orders. And so suddenly we realised they needed a whole different way to go and to produce this. And so they teamed up with RS and Farnell and went to a licensing model whereby they license the design, and then RS and Farnell, as happens now, manufacture them and distribute them. And it's been a real roller coaster. I mean, one of the really cool things is a year on, we've now sold 1 million units, or over 1 million units now, in our first year. And something which we all thought was going to be sort of a hobby has now become quite a mainstream business. You know, it's incredible to think that I'm now giving talks in Portugal, we're in Manchester last week, going back to London. You know, there's a community that's really worldwide. And I think it is because people have been, they've been waiting to go and make robots, they've been waiting to go and make things and not have to spend all their money to go and do it. It's also great to see how many side projects we've started off. I know we're going to see the Custard board later. It's great to see there's so many third parties that have taken this to go and develop cases, to go and develop add-ons, and it's really quite powerful. And the thing I'd say to you is, what we're keen to do is to say, don't be of the generation where we give you Lego bricks and you ask what model to make. Engineering is the art of making. Computers were just invented because engineers are lazy and they wanted to go and do math really quickly. I know that the foundation's aim is to push computer science, but what we're not saying to you is, you should learn computer science because you should. We're saying, learn computer science, it's a great tool to allow you to go and make cool things. We've had Raspberry Pis sent up into near space and weather balloons. I was with a company today that makes an aquatic drone using a Raspberry Pi that goes around to like a parrot waddle in the water. And we've seen Nerf guns that trace people's faces with webcams and fire Nerf gun bullets out. And a whole range of projects that are possible just because this thing is so easy to program, it's so cheap. So anyone who's not familiar with a Raspberry Pi, it's basically it's an ARM processor in a system-on-chip package. It's an ARM 11, it's V6 architecture, 700 megahertz nominal, coupled with a very powerful GPU. And the great thing about this is it makes it perfect for doing media center operations because it can decode 1080p quite comfortably. We're going to be releasing a camera, the first alpha boards have gone out, which the GPU allows you to do. And that's then broken out into a whole bunch of different interfaces. We have a whole bunch of GPIO, along with high-level libraries in Python, so it's easy to go and program things. There's UARTs, there's SPI, there's I2C. There's a whole host of ways that you can go and turn this into your robot. And we'd really encourage you to go and do that. So I think it'd be really great at this point to possibly ask some questions. It's always quite hard to deal with these things where we've kind of got a pixelated mass of people on the other end of the screen. But it'd be great to maybe, whilst there's not too many people here, have a bit of a discussion about what you guys were doing with your Pis, maybe answer some of your questions. And really hopefully that'll be a valuable experience for us all.
Okay, yeah, Rob, does anyone have any questions for Rob? Yeah, go on,
I actually know nothing about the Raspberry Pi, so I'm wondering what kind of software layers there are. What do you actually program Pi in?
Okay.
If I wanted to sit and write a program today, what am I dealing with?
Okay, so let me just talk you through it. So this here, in this nice box, is a Raspberry Pi. It's manufactured in the UK. There's two models. There's a Model A and a Model B. The only difference is the Model A has half the RAM of the Model B and only has one USB port and no wired networking. But the Model A is available for £19 and the Model B is about 27. And this is what it looks like. You can probably see that. Essentially, this black plastic square in here, the sand and gold inside that is the ARM processor along with the GPU. Got HDMI, so you can connect it to your TV, much like you might do your Xbox. USB, so you can plug in a keyboard or a mouse or a webcam or anything that's USB. Wired networking, so you can do networking. There's an audio jack, there's a composite port. So, a lot of schools are saying we don't have HDMI monitors. That isn't a problem, because with the composite, that's kind of like PlayStation 1 connectivity. You can even use SCART adapters. You can go all the way back to your CRTs. The great thing about the Pi is that you can pick up something for £19, but all the rest of the periphery you'd need to run it, you can probably get for free. You can probably go on FreeCycle or Craigslist or whatever, pick up a CRT, find a cheap small SD card, find a mobile phone charger. Actually, if I keep going around and get to that bit, yeah. So this is where the GPIO are, on this bit here, this header. A bunch of pins you can connect things to. We've got two flat panel connectors here. One's for a display, which is coming out later in the year. And this one's for camera, which is coming out fairly shortly. And there's a SD card slot, or there's no onboard memory with the Pi. All of the memory's on the SD card. But one of the great things about that is it means it's very easy to switch operating systems. So, for example, because of the GPU being up to 1080p, a lot of people use this as a media center using XBMC. So you might have like an XBMC board and then XBMC card. You might have like a Raspbian card or whatever operating systems you're using, and then you just have to switch the SD cards, which is much easier than having to worry about boot partitions or anything else you might have to do on your laptop. And then we've got a micro USB port, which is how we do the charging. So it's literally just a phone charger. That's all I use to power mine. So in terms of software stack, basically, this is a computer. This runs Linux. So it runs the Linux kernel and then runs a whole variety of different distributions on top of that. So you can get Arch, you can get Debian, you can get Slackware, along with more esoteric stuff, like you can get Firefox OS and you can get Chrome OS. And the benefit of having Debian, we actually use a thing called Raspbian that's a port of Debian. Debian's targeted for ARM v7, which is the latest instruction set. We've got a thing called Raspbian, which is a port of v6, which is the instruction set which our chip uses, which is optimized for that. Is that, it's just like dealing with any other Linux box. You've got GCC, you've got JVMs, you've got everything you need to program in whatever language you want to use. Now, in terms of education, we see the progression as being Scratch and Python. Now, I don't know if you ever use Scratch, but Scratch is a great sort of graphical programming language. It basically gives you a bunch of sort of drag and drop boxes where you can easily do things like loops and manipulate variables. And it allows you to very quickly sort of create algorithms without having to use the scale with algorithms. And it's a great teaching aid because it shows you data flow without ever having to think too much about it. We then like moving on to Python. Python's a great language, it's very extensible, it's very human readable, it's very powerful. Most things have libraries in Python, particularly our GPIO, and we think that's a great way to work. So I guess a long-winded answer to your question, but just to fill in the blanks about what is the Pi. So I guess the answer is, programming languages, anything you like, frankly, from Fortran and Erlang through to C, but we recommend Python if you want to get something done, C if you're doing low-level kernel stuff, and Scratch if you're just starting out.
Excellent, thanks Rob. Does that answer your question, John? Yeah. Anyone else? Come on.
What are people doing with their Pis? Do you want to have a bit of discussion about projects? Put your hands up if your Pi's still in the box. Okay, so how are we going to inspire you to go and do something cool? I mean, at the very least, what you can do is turn it into a media center. It's a very good streaming media center. But what I'd encourage you to do is, Pi is very free, right? What we're doing is empowering you and saying, don't let everyone else tell you what your computer devices should look like. Don't let Steve Jobs tell you what your computing devices should look like. Rather than having a doorbell that just makes a boring noise, why don't you have a doorbell that emails you, so you know someone's at the door? Or why don't you have a doorbell that just plays some random movie clip or something whenever someone presses it? Or maybe you could hook it up to a scrolling LED display so that when they pressed it, it said go away or something, or gave you a phone number to ring. Or perhaps you could link it to your phone via NFC so that you actually have a password on your phone which unlocks your door. There's a whole possibilities of stuff. We have great forums. There's a great community online. I'm sure as you'll see with the Custard board later, people have done most of the hard work for you. All you have to do is go out and say, hey, actually I want to change the world. I want to make the world fit around me. I want to use my own devices rather than just use the devices that other people have set up. I mean, hacking gets discussed a lot now, but to hack is to create something new out of something that was designed to do something else. So if you take a phone and turn it into a satellite, that's hacking. If you take your bicycle and turn it into a standing desk, that's hacking. It's taking something that it wasn't designed, taking something and making it do something it wasn't designed for. And it's really empowering because it allows you to actually take control of your own world rather than just passively using the objects in it. So has anyone actually done any hacks?
Yes, Seggy.
Hi Rob, we spoke earlier. I've used the Raspberry Pi. I love the GPIO port on the Raspberry Pi. I think that was the best. I mean, I'm not a programmer. I'm an electronics engineer, and I love that because it allows me to control stuff easily. Just to give you an example, we needed a test system at work, and I got that done in Visual Basic by somebody else because I didn't know how to program in Visual Basic, and all the barriers you said were in place were exactly right. It sort of gelled with me, but I got the Raspberry Pi out of the box, The GPIO port, I've never used Python before. It took me about a couple of hours to get the hang of it because it's not too different from BASIC, which I used to use a long time ago. I'm probably about the same age as Eben Upton because I grew up with the Acorn Atom and the Acorn BBC. And I used the Pi to set up an automatic test system, a live test on one of our products. We just operate the solenoid, press a button, check that it was working so that we could work out how long the battery lasted.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that's to be done. And you know, we see the Raspberry Pi as being involved in lots of other projects, and you know, I think that's great.
We've got a question down the front, I think, Rob.
Hi Rob, I'm a computer technician at a secondary school, and I stumbled across the Raspberry Pi and I looked at it and thought this is exactly what we can do to introduce to the year 7 to 11-year-olds and upwards.
Yeah.
I'm not a programmer either myself, so I don't know Python or C, but from September onwards I want to start using the Raspberry Pi to do a computer science club in the school. Where's the best place to start? Okay, so first off, you know, the Raspberry Pi isn't a desktop replacement, yeah? So the important thing here is that, you know, we get a lot of teachers coming in, I'm not saying this is what you were suggesting, but we get a lot of teachers coming in saying, you know, the Raspberry Pi is difficult to set up, you know, we already have computers. We're not saying get rid of the computers you already have, we're not saying set up a suite of 20 Raspberry Pis. You know, we see the Raspberry Pi as a Lego brick. So what we advise is, you know, if you're already teaching Python maybe, or Scratch in your classes, then what you can do is you can maybe have an after-school club that uses that knowledge to go and make cool things, you know, with it. So for example, you know, if you're using Scratch, you can get a whole bunch of add-ons that allow you to use Scratch to control the GPIO. So there's a library which allows you to control the physical pins, and then there's other boards and things you can add on to easily turn that into robots or whatever it is that you're interested in. And that way, you know, it's kind of empowering to the kids because they have to learn the information on how to do this programming anyway, but it gives them a way to be creative about it. You know, what we want to do is show people that engineering is a creative field. You know, engineering is the art of making stuff. It's not just the art of doing math. And that's what I think is quite important. And so, you know, what I'd say is, you know, if you're not teaching programming in school, then maybe try and form a code club or possibly a coder dojo. You know, there's lots of good after-school clubs that are, you know, they have a setup to do programming. Alternatively, you know, you can get a lot of good resources online, like Learn Python the Hard Way. And what we'd encourage you to do is to use the Pis as the way to really inspire kids to go and do it. You know, maybe you can sit the kids down and say, you know, what is it you want to make? You know, get them to be creative to come up with something. And then you can learn, you know, you learn by doing in order to create the thing that you've designed. You know, that's the thing that I'm very passionate about. I feel personally I learn best, and I think most people do, you know, when they have something that, you know, they need to know it to do something they're interested in, that they're, you know, they're engaged and it's relevant. And I think sort of the hacking creativity of making stuff is probably a great way to do that. I don't know if that helps answer your question. I mean, I guess the first port of call maybe is to contact Coder Dojo or just set up a code club. That might be a good way to do it if you don't already have programming in your school. I don't know quite what your setup is. Yeah, we don't do any programming whatsoever. We basically just teach the ICT, you know, so access and that kind of really dull, boring stuff. So it's just trying to, this is a really good way of energising kids to get more involved in computer science. And I think I went down the route of looking at the Arduino, so again using PyFace and other things, using the GPIO output to get them to do very, very simple programs just to make flashing lights and what have you. Very, very simple to start off with, but at the same time really wanting to get a wow factor in there as well. Yeah, so if you go on ocr.org.uk/Raspberry Pi, we've partnered with OCR to do some lesson plans and learning resources. And on their website, they've got a bunch of recipe cards that I've written, and they allow you to do some really cool stuff, like without any tools or soldering irons, you know, you can turn on an LED just with a Raspberry Pi, a resistor, an LED, and a couple of wires. You don't even need to solder because you can get headers that go straight onto here. You don't really need a Pi face either, you can do it just straight with a board. And then there's an extension to that where you can make the LED only turn on when someone tweets a message. So you know that's quite engaging. You can have a situation where people tweet different colours and it turns on LEDs of different colours.
And that's all documented and very easy to do, and as I say, available on ocr.org.uk/Raspberry Pi. Another project on there, which you might have heard me talk about, is Screaming Jelly Baby, where literally all we've done is got 2 paper clips, connected them to some wires going to Raspberry Pi, put them inside a Jelly Baby, so that when you squeeze the Jelly Baby, the 2 paper clips touch, it makes a circuit, and it plays a sound. Which is pretty awesome, but I mean, it's a way you can have like a Jelly Baby piano. You know, it's only like 10 lines of Python as well, it's pretty simple. Or maybe you could have it so that when you squeeze your Jelly Baby, it tweets out by combining 2 recipe cards. So those are some examples of some really simple, really cheap things you can do. You don't need any tools or soldering irons. As I say, the Python's very short. You know, if they've never done programming before, Python might be a bit of a step. You might want to start off with something like Scratch, possibly. There's also lots of great resources for Scratch about. But yeah, I'd say one of the most useful things you could probably do is contact Code Club maybe, or Code Dojo, and see if you could set one up in your area. Because you know, they're a whole after-school scheme set up with the aim of doing this. And Google have recently funded us to give away 15,000 Pis to Code Dojo and Code Club and other societies. So that's very useful.
Excellent, that's fantastic, thank you.
Anyone else? Everyone else?
Yeah. Down in the office, outside, there's a workshop building.
So hi, good evening. My name is Segaran, everyone calls me Seggy for short. I have got a small demo, but I've also got a PowerPoint presentation, and this basically complements most of what Rob's been saying. So I've been an electronics engineer all my life, and as you probably heard me earlier, really delighted with how simply I could use the Raspberry Pi for some of the projects. What I realized fairly early on with the Raspberry Pi, looking at the forums and things, was that whereas there were a lot of discussions on how to use the Pi as a media center and to control stuff and things, people were having a hard time handling the electronic side of things. And so what I've tried to concentrate on is putting up as much information as I can on the GPIO port, so people could use the Pi to control things very easily. So I'm not a programmer, but this talk and the Custard Pi demo is about what you can do externally, interfacing to the real world with the Raspberry Pi. So you can see the GPIO header up on the corner there. It's 26 pins, and people, by using that, and of course some programming, have managed to do some really cool things. So there's a Raspberry robot, and you can see what's happened here is somebody's got a piggyback board on there with motor controllers, which controls the operation of the robot. And when you've developed your software with Python or Scratch or with anything, using any other software for the Raspberry Pi, you can then set it up so that whenever it powers up, it runs on its own. So you don't need a keyboard and monitor and mouse all the time. So it's self-powered there, and the power supply has been replaced by batteries. This is an interesting project again on the internet. It was done by a guy for his grandma, who was partially sighted, didn't have much dexterity, so she couldn't really manage what you and I could manage quite easily, which is an MP3 player for storybooks. So he built this box, there's a Raspberry Pi in there, and all he does is load up a USB card with a storybook for her, and she just plugs it in, single button play, and if she falls asleep halfway through a story, she can quickly step back. So single button operation to step back and forward through the story. This is a really old game called Ladder Game, which you can build up with basic electronics, and again, there's some really good projects on a blog called Gordon's Project. And again, he lists the software in Python and a little bit of hardware to set this up. And basically, you move up this chain of LEDs. You got to press the button only when a light is on. And as you get further and further up, the light's on for shorter and shorter. So it's quite an interactive game. So it'd be a great game for an after-school project to build. How many of you are into electronics? Okay, so guys. I won't spend too long on this then. So that's the pinout on the GPIO board. Power supplies, there's 3.3 and 5 volts available, various outputs, etc., which I'll explain in a minute over the next few slides. So that's a summary of the pins. There's 26 pins for you to play with to control external electronics. That's just a summary. I'll just go through the ones in detail. So the power, there is 3.3 volts and 5 volt outputs on the GPIO. All the electronics on the Raspberry Pi board runs at 3.3. So just be careful about interconnecting that to any external 5 volt circuits. You can draw some current out. Definitely less than 50 milliamps off the 3.3 volt, but I think on the 5 volt you can draw more than 100 milliamp, but you may crash something because the Raspberry Pi just manages with a 1 amp supply. So you don't want to crash anything. So my advice is to keep that power consumption low. So there's 8 general purpose outputs, and you heard Rob talk about controlling LEDs, motors, etc. So you can use them as outputs or inputs. If you're using them outputs, there's just a small example of what you can do with them. Switch LEDs on and off, switch relays on and off, or actuate solenoid, which I've used to operate a switch on a product that we have. Inputs, you read switch status and various alarm inputs, etc. So for example, on the ladder game, all you need is to read switch status to find out when people are pressing the button and use the outputs to drive the relays. Logic high, logic low, and just be very careful about that because you mentioned the Arduino board. Most electronic circuits use 5 volt for logic, so just be very careful about interconnecting those. I2C, it's basically a proprietary bus used to interface to a lot of integrated circuits. SPI, another bus, again different selection of integrated circuits that you can interconnect to. So for example, if you wanted, the Raspberry Pi doesn't have any direct analog outputs or inputs, so if you wanted to read temperature, you can't do it. You've got to use an A to D chip, analog to digital converter chip, which will, which you can get an SPI or an I2C bus version of that to talk to. UART for serial input-output, and there are 6 pins that are not used. And the general advice, if you buy Evan Upton's book, which is Introduction to Pi, is never connect anything to these pins. I think they're reserved for further use, and I think one of them has been used on the newer versions of the Pi. But be very careful if you're hacking with the GPIO port not to connect anything to that. Other precautions there. And again, I can email a copy of this PowerPoint to anybody if you're interested. There are various boards that have come out for the Raspberry Pi, piggyback boards. That's with all sorts of esoteric names that play on the word Pi. There's a Slice of Pi, which is a small prototyping board that plugs straight onto the 26-way connector there, and gives you a small prototyping area. So that's the Pi plate, which is similar in concept but has a larger prototyping area and an area if you wanted to solder a surface mount IC onto there. I believe this board was designed by one of the designers of the chip that's used on the Raspberry Pi. It's called the GERT board, and that plugs in through a ribbon connector and gives you a whole load more accessories as listed on here, including a motor controller, which is very useful if you're doing robotic controls. It also has room for a separate microprocessor if you wanted to use high speed, if you wanted to do any high speed development. This is a simple breakout connector. So if you wanted to go onto a breadboard through the GPIO board, this allows you to connect to that. And that's just a platform to protect your Pi from any damage when you're connecting out to the prototyping board, and that's from a company called Escape Hang. I believe they sell on Amazon, etc. So the Custard Pi, that's the Pi Face, which is the most recently launched add-on for the Pi for anybody wanting to do electronic hacking, as it's been referred to. So that's got a couple of relays in for some heavy-duty control, and it's got 8 open collector outputs and 8 digital inputs, again for controlling external hardware. To the Custard Pi range, there's a couple of products which I've brought out. The first one is just a protection layer. You saw all the earlier warnings about protecting the pins from damage, and really once you've damaged the Broadcom chip, you're going to have to throw the Pi away. So just be careful. You can connect straight to the GPIO port. Just double check your connections before you power the Pi up if you do that. All this board does is protect the various pins from accidental damage and allows you easy connectivity through a set of screw terminals. And the Custard Pi 2 is a general purpose board. Again, plugs in there. It's got 4 buffer digital outputs, 4 inputs, and 2 analog outputs and 2 analog inputs. So as I said, the analog inputs you could use for temperature monitoring. So if you wanted to manage, I heard you mentioning building control, so if you wanted to manage the temperature in a room, you could, in theory, have a temperature monitor going straight into one of the analog pins, write a bit of Python code to do feedback control, and use one of the outputs through a relay, because you couldn't control an electric fire directly, switch an electric fire on or off. And then you can do some sophisticated code control on there to put timing controls. And if you connect to the internet, you could switch that on remotely. So that's so very, very cheaply you've got a building control system. So you've got a holiday home, you've got a system set up here. So I think the Pi is fantastic for home automation on a low budget. And all the add-on boards that we've talked about will give you all the external hardware control aspects for home automation. Any questions? Anybody got any home automation projects in mind?
Done some with a little USB gadget you can get called a Tastic.
Okay.
It lets you control those, the home automation sockets.
Mains.
Yeah, remote controlled mains sockets. You buy them in B&Q places like that.
Yeah.
Well, this is a little, I think it's 86 something megahertz transmitter. It's USB, and there's a library for Python that allows you to control it. So we've got it hooked up to an SQL database, turning on and off the different devices at
and
different
you do that
times.
through the Raspberry Pi?
Yes.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Great. So, I don't know if everybody got that. So, if I understand you rightly, you just bought, I think they're 20 quid a pack or something, a set of remote control sockets with are they radio or infrared? Okay, radio. So you can operate them from other rooms.
Yeah.
So, Rob was on about engineers basically wanting to do things because they're lazy, and I love remote control and automatic things. So you could control various appliances around the house from the dining table. Great. So, but if you imagine the handheld remote control, which is battery powered, you can replace the switch functions with a relay, right? If you wanted to. And those relays could then be controlled from the Raspberry Pi. So, and the Raspberry Pi then connects to the internet, which means what you could do from the dining table with the B&Q remote control, you can do from the other corner of the world. Isn't that fantastic? And you could do it for a budget of about 50 quid. 25 quid for the Raspberry Pi and 20 quid for the remote control sockets from B&Q. So that's the kind of thing that the guys from the Raspberry Pi Foundation are talking about. For the first time, the tools for that sort of control can be bought for a very, very low cost, with a very low cost budget, within the budget of a typical older teenager. So it's a great, great stuff that you can do with it. Anybody else with any ideas for home automation? So we talked about building control, we talked about remote control using the cheap stuff from app to do some new things with. So I've talked about most of those really: building control, test instrumentation, and home automation, switching appliances on and off with the Raspberry Pi. I think get learning. There are various books out already, and really you can use the internet for researching stuff. I'm kind of old-fashioned. I just like to read a book to get myself up to date. Because the internet can be a bit scratchy. You can get a little bit of information here, a little bit of information there. There's an excellent book by Evan Upton, which really builds on the sort of stuff that Rob Bishop's been telling us today. If you want to get up to speed with Python and you've never done any programming, the recently launched book by Simon Monk is excellent. I've got a copy of that. And if you want to learn a little bit about Linux, I haven't read that yet, but I'm sure it's got some good reviews on Amazon. It's supposed to be a good book. And on the electronics side, I'm planning to launch a book later this year, around May time, which is primarily based around using the GPIO port and learning electronics, really. So it's fairly basic stuff, and there'll be project-based learning. Simple things like driving LEDs to more complex things, like managing the switch on electric fires on and off. So to me, the three things about the Pi really: low cost. The internet connectivity is fantastic. You heard Rob talking about Twitter feeds and controlling the Pi using Twitter feeds. That's mind-blowing. There's a lot of stuff you can do. And I've heard a few people compare the Pi unfavorably with the Arduino boards. And one thing that the Arduino board doesn't have is very easy connectivity to the internet. But the Pi is a very different beast, and you can't compare the two. And the fact that it's got an internet connection is really good, and the GPIO port. So given the low cost, the internet connection, and the GPIO port, you've got a fantastic tool in your hands. So get creating. So the only thing that stops you is your imagination, really, because everything else is provided. You've got the tools, been in the books, get creating. Thank you.
So any last questions, perhaps?
Sorry.
Has anyone been inspired to go and do some new projects?
We've got a couple, Robert, in a second.
Okay, just got to
I come from a web development background, so I'm used to programming, but kind of at a more higher level language.
Yeah.
Higher level. So if I wanted to use a Raspberry Pi, for example, to create a basic home security system where I could connect it to a webcam and access the webcam remotely via the internet.
Yeah.
What kind of work would be involved in doing that? Is it something with somebody with my experience more with web development languages would be able to achieve?
Definitely. Well, I mean, I think one of the great things about open source and the web is there's so many resources. You know, I mean, you could easily do that with a language like Python. And, there's great books like Learn Python the Hard Way. There's a Code Academy course in Python. It's all the learning materials if you want to go pick that up. Things like Stack Exchange and our forums are great for doing that. the way I'd suggest implementing a home security system like that is to wait till our camera comes out. That'll have a high-level interface to that. You could then use Python to set it up as a web server using like Nginx or Django or something, and then stream using that. And I think it'd be very achievable. I mean, the thing I'd encourage you to go and do is maybe have a look on YouTube, have a look on our forums, have a look on our website, see all the other projects people have done, because I'm sure there'll be lots of people who've already done a lot of the work that you could maybe build on. It's a great thing about open source. We do stuff that's cool, and we share it, and that means other people can do things. But yeah, definitely. I'd love to encourage you to go and do it.
Great, thanks for that.
No, Seggy, you want to?
It's it was more a question about the foundation. It sold 1 million units, fantastic worldwide success. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, no, it's really impressive. We still haven't quite achieved what we set out to do, right? We sold 1 million units, but we think probably only 300 to 400,000 of those are in the hands of kids. A lot of those have gone to nostalgic parents. A lot of them have gone on media centres. And so what we need to do now is to get the educational materials together, to get the lesson plans, get the packaging, really get them in the hands of kids. I mean, these 15,000 pies that Google have given us to give away is really going to help with that. And we're going to build on that going forward.
Thanks. Any more for any more? Yeah.
Hi. So I've got to build something for my bike, some sort of controller for the instrument cluster, also some sort of security.
Yeah.
So alarm or everything. Can I do this with just a Raspberry Pi without the Arduino? Because on the bike, it's the space. It's a problem.
I'm sure you probably could. I mean, so if you think of the pin-out from the Raspberry Pi, we have everything apart from analog. So as long as you don't need any analog, you'd be fine. So that would probably work. So, for example, you could maybe get a GSM dongle, like a USB GSM adapter that you could plug into the USB. You could maybe attach like accelerometer, say, so that put that all in a weatherproof box. There's lots of Raspberry Pi cases that would all fit within. And you could have a system written in Python whereby if you shook the bike too much, the accelerometer detected it and sent you a text or called you or something. That'd be quite a simple, self-contained implementation to do. You could either then power that off the bike battery, or if you get one of those lithium-ion remote control car batteries, a bunch of AAAs, it can still last a pretty long time.
All right, thank you.
Any more? Listen.
Keep you running around there, Richard.
So just ask for a reminder, what's the best way for me to contact them about the free Raspberry Pis for education? Sorry, I apologise because you probably already mentioned this, but just to remind me, what's the best way of contacting you to apply for some free Raspberry Pis for education?
So you can't apply to us directly, and what you have to do is you have to apply through the bodies that we're working with, so through Code Club or Coder-Dojo. So, for example, if you are a school, the thing to do would be to contact Code Club or Coder-Dojo and say, we'd like to set up a Code Club in our school, how can you help us? And they'll put you in contact with industry contacts, they'll sort you out with all the materials, and they can then apply for pies for you through us. But it's not something that people can do directly, and it's not something that we actually handle, simply because we don't have enough people to do it, right?
That's something that I know quite a bit about, so I'm sorry. Any more for any more? I think we're done, Rob, with questions.
Excellent.
Yeah, so we'll wrap up. So thanks very much for your time and thanks for joining us.
You're very welcome. Sorry I was slightly jilted and delivered digitally, but
that's fine. Next time we'll get you up.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully if we can get some pies in a new classroom and we can get a couple of hacks out there and projects, then that'll be a successful hour, right? Yeah, excellent. So yeah, so thanks very much, and a round of applause I think for Rob. It feels very weird getting applause from Scarborough in Lisbon. It's just telepresence stuff's a bit weird. Excellent. So we'll let you go now for tapas or what you have there now. So yeah, excellent. Thanks very much. Thanks, everyone. Please email us your projects if you're doing anything cool working. We'd love to see it. Excellent. No problem. Great. Okay. Thanks very much, everyone. Thanks, mate.